the message you typically hear from church pulpits or religious institutions. In fact, it's a truth so revolutionary that, when Smith Wigglesworth first began teaching it after decades of profound spiritual exploration, it shattered the comfortable boundaries of conventional Christianity. Now here's what most people miss when they think about Jesus Christ. For centuries, we've been conditioned to see him as an unreachable figure, someone to admire from a distance, to worship as utterly different from ourselves, almost as if his divine nature separated him completely from our human experience. Has this ever happened? To you? That feeling of distance when you pray as if you're sending messages into an empty void, hoping they somehow reach a God who exists far beyond your earthly struggles? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. What Wigglesworth discovered through his remarkable spiritual journey completely transforms this paradigm. He found that Christ was never meant to be just a historical person we read about in ancient texts or a distant deity we petition for favors. Instead, Christ represents a living presence, a consciousness, a divine awareness that doesn't belong to just one person who walked the earth 2,000 years ago, but exists as the fundamental spiritual reality available to every human being right now, in this very moment. Think about the implications of this for just a second. If this is true, it means that the separation you've felt, the spiritual longing you've carried, the sense that divine power is somehow out of your reach, all of it has been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of your own spiritual identity. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might not just change your religious beliefs, it could revolutionize your entire experience of life itself. Wigglesworth spent years unveiling this mystery, and what he revealed challenges everything traditional religion has taught us about our relationship with the divine. He showed that spiritual awakening isn't about becoming something you're not, but rather recognizing what you've always been beneath the surface of your human experience. What you're about to discover is how this recognition opens doorways to experiencing the same power that performed miracles, healed the sick, and transformed lives, not as something external that you beg for, but as something that flows naturally when you awaken to who you truly are. So the question becomes, are you ready to explore what happens when you truly recognize the Christ presence, not as something external, but as the living reality of your own spiritual identity? Here's where the journey takes a fascinating turn. When we look at Jesus of Nazareth through the lens that Wigglesworth discovered, we see something completely different from the traditional narrative. Jesus wasn't born with some supernatural advantage that made him fundamentally different from you and me. He was a man, a real human being who walked dusty roads, felt hunger, experienced emotions, faced temptations. But somewhere along his spiritual journey, something remarkable happened. He became so completely filled with Christ consciousness that his human personality, with all its limitations and ego-driven desires, dissolved into pure spiritual being. Think of it like this. Imagine a window so perfectly clean and transparent that you don't even notice the glass anymore. You only see the brilliant light shining through it. That's what Jesus became. A transparency. His human self didn't disappear, but it stopped blocking the divine presence that was always there, waiting to express itself fully. This transformation isn't just some beautiful metaphor or poetic imagery. It's the hidden truth behind every miracle, every healing, every extraordinary demonstration of spiritual power that we read about in the Gospels. And here's what might surprise you most. When Jesus performed those miraculous healings, restoring sight to the blind, making the paralyzed walk, even raising the dead, he wasn't using some special divine favor that only he had access to. The secret wasn't in his personal power at all. In fact, Jesus himself told us this directly when he said, "I can of mine own self do nothing." Most people read right past that statement without grasping its profound implications. He was literally revealing the mechanics of spiritual power, showing us that miracles don't flow through human effort, willpower, or even religious devotion. They happen through recognition, through awakening to the complete oneness with the infinite source that has always existed within us. Jesus recognized this truth so completely that there was zero separation in his consciousness between his human self and the divine presence. That recognition became the open channel through which infinite power could flow into the visible world. The impact of this understanding on your own life cannot be overstated. It means that the same consciousness, the same spiritual power, the same divine presence that expressed itself through Jesus is available right now, in this moment, as your own fundamental identity. This isn't about comparing yourself to Jesus or trying to achieve some impossible spiritual standard. It's about understanding the journey he demonstrated. A journey from human limitation to spiritual transparency. Behind the scenes of every challenge you face, every decision you make, every moment of your existence, this Christ consciousness is present, waiting for you to recognize it. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how this recognition completely transforms, not just your beliefs, but the actual mechanics of how you approach prayer, healing, and your entire relationship with divine power. If this understanding is resonating with something deep inside you, write in the comments, "I'm ready to see clearly." What makes Wigglesworth's teaching so revolutionary is this. The Christ presence he's talking about isn't something you need to develop over years of spiritual practice. It's not a reward for good behavior or perfect religious devotion. It's not even something you achieve after mastering meditation techniques or attending countless retreats. This presence exists within you right now, in this exact moment, as you're reading these words. It's your fundamental spiritual identity, the truth of who you are beneath every label, every story, every limitation you've ever believed about yourself. I create these videos because truths this powerful deserve to be accessible and practical. If you've felt that value in what we've explored, I'd love for you to subscribe and continue this journey of spiritual transformation with me. This creates a massive mindset shift that most people miss completely. We've been conditioned to think of ourselves as broken humans trying desperately to become spiritual. We pray as if we're beggars pleading with a distant king for scraps of divine favor. We strive and struggle, thinking that maybe if we're good enough, pure enough, devoted enough, we might eventually earn access to spiritual power. But that entire paradigm is built on a hidden misunderstanding of your true nature. You're not a human being trying to become spiritual. You're a spiritual being who has temporarily forgotten your divine identity. The Christ consciousness that Wigglesworth talks about, this same presence that flowed through Jesus, isn't waiting for you to qualify for it. It's already present, already perfect, already whole, regardless of what appears to be happening in your human experience. Whether your bank account is overflowing or empty, whether your body feels healthy or sick, whether your relationships are harmonious or falling apart, none of these circumstances change the fundamental spiritual perfection that is your true identity. And here's where this understanding becomes intensely practical rather than just beautiful philosophy. Every struggle you're facing right now, the physical pain that won't go away, the emotional wounds that keep reopening, the financial pressure that keeps you awake at night, the relationship conflicts that drain your energy, all of these challenges can be transformed through recognition of your divine nature. This isn't me offering you positive thinking techniques or psychological strategies. This is about awakening to a spiritual reality that has real, tangible impact on your daily life. The same power that healed the blind, that made the paralyzed walk, that brought the dead back to life. This isn't locked away in ancient history. It's your birthright as a spiritual being. Behind the scenes of every challenge, beneath the surface of every problem, this Christ consciousness is present, waiting to be recognized. The transformation doesn't happen because you fix yourself or solve your problems through human effort. It happens in that moment of recognition, when you remember what you truly are. Most people approach their difficulties from a position of lack, believing they need to get something they don't have, become someone they're not, or convince God to intervene in their circumstances. But Wigglesworth discovered a completely different pathway. The journey isn't about gaining spiritual power. It's about removing the veils of misunderstanding that have blocked your awareness of the power that's always been yours. Each decision you make from this recognition, each moment you choose to see yourself as spirit rather than limited flesh, creates an opening for divine presence to demonstrate itself in practical, visible ways. What revelations might unfold in your own life if you truly grasped this truth, not just intellectually but experientially, feeling it shift something fundamental in how you relate to every circumstance you face. Let me show you exactly how this recognition transforms the very mechanics of prayer and healing in ways that produce remarkable, undeniable results. If you're beginning to sense that there's something profoundly true in what you're hearing, type in the comments, "I recognize this truth." The conventional approach to challenges keeps most people trapped in an exhausting cycle. When illness strikes, when relationships crumble, when financial crisis looms, we immediately identify ourselves as broken humans desperately needing divine intervention. We fall to our knees pleading with a distant deity, hoping our prayers are somehow loud enough or sincere enough to capture God's attention. We bargain, we beg, we promise to be better if only heaven would reach down and fix what's wrong with us. But here's the transformation that Wigglesworth unveiled through his years of spiritual exploration. When you're facing any challenge, you're not actually a broken human pleading for help from above. You're a perfect spiritual expression who has temporarily forgotten your divine nature. The problem isn't your circumstances. The problem is amnesia, a forgetting of what you truly are beneath the surface of human experience. And transformation doesn't happen because God finally hears your prayers and decides to intervene. It happens in that precise moment of recognition when you remember your true identity. This shift in perspective changes everything about how you approach difficulties. Instead of seeing yourself as deficient, lacking, damaged, or unworthy, you begin to recognize that behind the scenes of every challenge, there exists a perfect spiritual reality that has never been touched by human limitation. Your true self, this Christ consciousness that is your fundamental identity, doesn't need healing because it has never been sick. It doesn't need prosperity because it has never been poor. It doesn't need love because it is love itself. Now, this understanding completely revolutionizes what prayer actually is. Most of us were taught that prayer means sending requests upward to a God who exists somewhere beyond the clouds. We construct careful petitions, listing our needs and desires, hoping they'll be granted if we phrase them correctly or demonstrate enough faith. We pray as if we're customers placing orders with a divine supplier, waiting anxiously to see if our requests will be fulfilled. But when you truly grasp that Christ lives as your being, not as a separate entity you're praying to, but as the consciousness you are, prayer undergoes a radical metamorphosis. It stops being about request and becomes pure recognition. You're not trying to convince an external God to notice your problems and solve them. You're awakening to the divine presence that has literally never been absent from your experience, not even for a single moment. This journey into genuine prayer requires a complete reversal of everything religion taught you. Instead of talking at God, you learn to be quiet and listen. Instead of listing your needs, you recognize the infinite abundance already present. Instead of begging for healing, you acknowledge the perfect wholeness that is your spiritual birthright. The impact of this shift is profound and immediate. When you stop approaching prayer as negotiation with a distant deity, and instead recognize it as awakening to present reality, something fundamental changes in your consciousness. The mindset shift here cannot be overstated. You're no longer a powerless human hoping divine power might occasionally flow toward you if you pray hard enough. You're the very transparency through which divine power naturally flows when human resistance dissolves. Every decision to see yourself this way, every moment of recognition, every instance of remembering your true nature, these become the openings through which miracles manifest in your daily experience. What revelations might unfold if you approached your next challenge not as a problem needing God's solution, but as an opportunity to recognize the Christ presence that has never left you? If this is shifting something in how you understand prayer and your relationship with the divine, write in the comments, "Prayer is recognition." The beauty of what Wigglesworth discovered is that spiritual transformation doesn't happen by adding something new to your life. You don't need more techniques, more knowledge, more spiritual practices, piled on top of everything else you're already doing. The journey is actually the opposite. It's about removing the veils of misunderstanding that have been obscuring your spiritual vision all along. It's like cleaning layers of dust off a window that was always transparent, but appeared opaque because of accumulated debris. This explains why dramatic shifts happen in people's lives in ways that seem almost miraculous to observers. I've witnessed chronic health conditions that were completely unresponsive to medical treatment suddenly vanish when someone glimpsed this truth about their spiritual identity. Not through years of gradual improvement, but through instant recognition. One moment they're identifying as a sick person desperately seeking healing, and the next moment something fundamental shifts in their consciousness. They recognize themselves as spiritual beings who have never actually been touched by disease. If what we've shared has touched something real in you, giving this video a like helps more people discover these transformative teachings. It creates ripples beyond what we can see. The same pattern appears in family conflicts that have festered for decades. Bitter resentments, deep wounds, relationships that seemed irreparably broken. These can dissolve almost overnight when just one person in the situation recognizes the Christ presence not only in themselves, but in the other person. The external circumstances haven't changed. The history hasn't been erased. But behind the scenes of all that human drama, a deeper truth has been remembered, and that recognition transforms everything. What creates this impact isn't human effort or positive thinking. It's the removal of false beliefs that were blocking your awareness of what's always been true. Every veil that falls away reveals more of the spiritual perfection that has never actually been hidden, only obscured by layers of misunderstanding about who you are. This leads to what I can only describe as an identity revolution. When you truly grasp, not just intellectually but experientially, that you're not a limited human having occasional spiritual moments, but rather a spiritual being having a temporary human experience, your entire relationship with life undergoes fundamental transformation. Suddenly, every challenge that appears in your path stops looking like a burdensome problem you need to escape from or fix through human effort. Instead, each difficult situation becomes an invitation, an opportunity to demonstrate the Christ presence that is your true nature. That conflict at work, that financial pressure, that health scare, that relationship tension, none of these are accidents or punishments or evidence that something's wrong with you. They're opportunities for spiritual awakening, moments where you get to choose whether you'll respond from human limitation or from divine consciousness. The mindset shift here is radical. You stop being a victim of circumstances and start recognizing yourself as spiritual presence moving through human conditions. The decision you make in each moment, to identify with limitation or with divine nature, determines your entire experience. This isn't about denying that challenges exist in your human experience. It's about understanding what you truly are beneath those surface appearances. When you know yourself as spirit, the journey through difficulties becomes completely different. Problems don't necessarily disappear from your life, but your relationship with them transforms so dramatically that you might as well be living in a different reality. What once triggered fear, anxiety, and desperate scrambling now becomes just another opportunity to recognize and express the infinite presence that you are. The revelations that emerge from this understanding don't just change your spiritual beliefs. They transform how you show up in every single moment of your existence. If you're beginning to sense this identity shift happening in your own awareness, drop in the comments, "I am spiritual being." The evidence for this understanding isn't just theoretical or philosophical. It's demonstrated in thousands of transformative healings that occurred when people caught even a glimpse of this spiritual truth. We're talking about diseases that had resisted every medical treatment suddenly disappearing, relationships that appeared irreparably broken experiencing complete reconciliation, financial situations that looked absolutely hopeless transforming into unexpected abundance. And these weren't temporary improvements that faded after a few weeks. They were profound shifts that altered entire life trajectories permanently. What makes these transformations so remarkable is their simplicity. There were no complex rituals, no years of spiritual training, no special qualifications required, just recognition. Just a moment when someone's consciousness opened wide enough to see past the surface appearance and glimpse the spiritual perfection that had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. Let me share a real example that demonstrates the hidden power of this recognition in ways that might surprise you. There was a woman who came to one of Wigglesworth's teachings carrying 15 years of bitter resentment toward her ex-husband. This wasn't just mild annoyance or occasional frustration. It was deep, corrosive anger that had poisoned every aspect of her emotional life for over a decade. She had tried everything conventional wisdom could offer: therapy sessions that explored her childhood wounds, forgiveness exercises that felt empty and forced, meditation retreats that brought temporary peace but no lasting change, even medication for the depression that had developed alongside her resentment. Nothing worked. The anger remained, festering beneath the surface of her daily life, affecting her new relationships, her health, her sense of well-being. Then she encountered this teaching about Christ consciousness, and something fundamental shifted in her awareness. She realized that holding on to this resentment wasn't just hurting her emotionally, it was actively denying the Christ presence in both herself and her former spouse. This recognition didn't require her to pretend the hurt hadn't happened or to excuse harmful behavior. It was about seeing a spiritual reality that existed beneath the human story. The transformation that followed defied every conventional expectation. Within just 3 weeks of this shift in consciousness, her ex-husband, who hadn't contacted her in years beyond necessary legal communications, called unexpectedly. The conversation that unfolded seemed almost impossible given their history. He apologized sincerely for years of hurtful behavior and asked for her forgiveness with genuine remorse. But what happened next revealed the true impact of her spiritual recognition. She found herself responding from a wellspring of authentic compassion she didn't even know she possessed. This wasn't her forcing herself to be kind or trying to be a good person. It was natural, spontaneous love emerging from the recognition of their shared spiritual identity beneath all the human drama. 15 years of conventional approaches couldn't create this healing, but 3 weeks of recognizing Christ consciousness dissolved barriers that seemed permanent. Behind the scenes of this transformation wasn't human effort or psychological technique. It was pure, spiritual recognition creating space for healing that conventional methods couldn't touch. The journey from resentment to reconciliation happened not through doing, but through seeing, through awakening to what was always true beneath the appearance of conflict. If stories like this are touching something real in your own experience with forgiveness and healing, write in the comments. Recognition heals everything. This principle of recognition doesn't just work in personal relationships. It demonstrates equally powerful results in the material realm, where many people assume spiritual truth has no relevance. Consider the businessman who attended one of Wigglesworth's teachings as a final desperate measure. He was facing imminent bankruptcy after exhausting every conventional solution his business training had taught him. He had refinanced, launched aggressive marketing campaigns, cut staff to the bone, hired expensive consultants. Nothing worked. 20 years of building his company were about to crumble, and he could see no way forward. When he heard this teaching about Christ consciousness being his true identity, something clicked into place that defied all his logical training. He stopped approaching his business from panic and desperation. Instead, he began each morning with a simple recognition, acknowledging the Christ presence within himself and within every person he would encounter that day. This wasn't just spiritual theory to make himself feel better. It completely transformed how he operated in the marketplace. The shift was subtle but profound. Instead of frantically chasing potential clients from a mindset of scarcity and fear, he started trusting that divine intelligence knew how to prosper him better than his anxious human mind could conceive. He stopped trying to manipulate outcomes through sheer force of will and started responding to opportunities from a place of inner certainty rather than outer desperation. The impact defied conventional business logic entirely. Within just 2 months, 3 major contracts appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Companies that had never responded to his proposals suddenly reached out wanting to work with him. Doors that had been firmly closed swung open without him pushing. What changed wasn't his strategy or his market conditions or his qualifications. It was his consciousness. The recognition of his spiritual identity created tangible results that years of human effort couldn't achieve. Now, understanding this principle intellectually is one thing, But Wigglesworth knew that transformation requires practical methods for maintaining this recognition, especially when circumstances appear overwhelming. This is where he introduced what he called the listening ear, a practice that reverses everything conventional religion taught about prayer. Most of us were trained to talk at God constantly. We fill our prayer time with words, petitions, requests, gratitude lists, confessions. We believe that more words equal better prayers, that we need to keep God informed about our needs and desires. But Wigglesworth discovered something revolutionary. Spiritual transformation accelerates dramatically when we reverse this dynamic entirely. Instead of constantly talking to God, the practice involves learning to be completely still and listen for divine guidance arising from within your own consciousness. This isn't about hearing audible voices or waiting for supernatural messages. It's about sensing the subtle current of wisdom that flows beneath the constant mental chatter most people mistake for their real thoughts. The journey begins simply. Just 5 minutes of complete silence each morning. Not asking for anything, not trying to solve problems, not even attempting to be spiritual. Just listening with receptive awareness. At first, you'll encounter the usual noise. Your mind will serve up worries about the day ahead, replay yesterday's. Conversations generate random thoughts that jump from topic to topic without logic. This is normal. Behind the scenes of all that mental static, something deeper is waiting. If you persist in this practice daily, you'll gradually sense a presence emerging that feels qualitatively different from ordinary thinking. It's quieter, gentler, more certain. This is Christ consciousness communicating with your receptive awareness, offering guidance that comes from infinite intelligence rather than limited human perspective. The decisions you make from this inner listening align with a wisdom that sees far beyond your immediate circumstances. If you're ready to begin practicing this listening presence in your own life, write in the comments, "I'm listening within." The listening practice naturally extends into your active daily life through what Wigglesworth called contemplative meditation. This isn't something reserved for quiet mornings in sacred spaces. It's a recognition you carry into every moment, especially during the most stressful and challenging situations. Throughout your day, when pressure builds and circumstances threaten to overwhelm you, you have a simple yet profound tool available. Silently remind yourself of the truth beneath appearances. I am not a body. I am not a mind. I am not emotions. I am Christ consciousness, appearing as individual being. This isn't positive affirmation trying to convince yourself of something that might not be true. It's recognition of spiritual fact and acknowledgement of what has always been true regardless of temporary circumstances. When you're stuck in traffic and frustration begins rising, instead of fuming about delays and wasted time, use those moments to contemplate your true identity. When financial pressure creates anxiety about paying bills, rather than spiraling into fear-based calculations of limitation, acknowledge the infinite abundance that is your spiritual inheritance. When dealing with difficult people whose behavior triggers your worst reactions, look past their human facade to the Christ presence that is their true nature, beneath all the personality drama. This practice creates a gradual but powerful mindset shift. Your perspective transforms from human reaction to spiritual response. The external circumstances haven't changed. The traffic is still slow. The bills are still due. The difficult person is still behaving the same way. But your relationship to these situations transforms completely. You stop being victimized by conditions and start demonstrating mastery through recognition of what you truly are. The journey through consistent practice reveals something remarkable. At first, maintaining this recognition requires conscious effort and intentional reminder. You have to deliberately pause and remember your spiritual identity when challenges arise. But as you persist day after day, something fundamental shifts behind the scenes of your consciousness. Spiritual recognition begins to flow automatically in situations that would have previously triggered immediate human reaction. Love emerges naturally in relationships that once produced only conflict and frustration. Peace becomes your default state, rather than something you occasionally achieve through tremendous effort. You're not working hard to maintain spiritual consciousness anymore. It's simply becoming who you are in your moment-to-moment experience. This is what Wigglesworth described as becoming a transparency for Christ. Your personality doesn't disappear or become generic. You remain uniquely yourself with your individual characteristics, preferences, and expressions. But something fundamental has shifted in how that personality functions. Instead of being an opaque barrier blocking divine presence, you become like a perfectly clean window, so transparent that people don't notice you so much as they notice the light shining through you. Divine love, wisdom, and power begin expressing themselves through your words, actions, and presence in ways that impact everyone around you, often without you even realizing it's happening. People sense something different about your energy, your responses, your entire way of being. The transformation isn't something you manufacture through spiritual techniques. It's the natural result of consistent recognition dissolving the veils that once obscured your true identity. What revelations are unfolding in your own consciousness as you hear these truths? The impact of this understanding extends far beyond personal benefit into every relationship and situation you encounter. If you're experiencing this shift from effort to natural flow in your spiritual journey, write in the comments, "I am becoming transparent." If you've made it this far in our time together, I have a feeling this message found you at exactly the right moment in your spiritual journey. The recognition we've been exploring, this understanding of Christ consciousness as your true identity, isn't just interesting spiritual philosophy. It's a practical pathway that transforms how you experience every single day of your life. I create these videos because I believe truths this powerful deserve to be shared in ways that make them accessible, practical, and immediately applicable to your real-world challenges. If you felt that value in what we've explored together, I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. Every week, we dive deep into spiritual principles that have the power to shift your entire experience of reality, not someday in the distant future, but right now in your present circumstances. And if something in this message has resonated with your inner knowing, if you sense that these words were meant to reach you today, let me know by writing in the comments, "This message found me." I genuinely love hearing from people who are walking this path of spiritual awakening, and your